All right. Let's say hello to good friend, fellow co-author, and author of a brand new book called The Next Big Crash. It's available at Amazon. And I hear the audiobook is pretty good, but
it's great.
I know somebody who wasn't asked to read the audiobook, but no.
Are you referring to yourself? You didn't get that email?
I think there was an email. It's an honor to be asked.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Yeah, right.
Yeah, you love to say
Justin
no. That's what it is. Yeah.
Justin is a good friend. Been for a long, long time. We've known each other forever. He's the Heartland Institute vice president. He's senior fellow for our Republic and author of the new book, The Big Crash, The Next Big Crash. So yesterday, quickly in a nutshell, recap what you told us yesterday about how we don't really actually own our stocks.
Yes. So 1960s and 70s, big Wall Street firms and other powerful interests, we're going to get into that, lobbied Congress and state lawmakers to totally transform your relationship to your investments. When you make securities investments, meaning stocks, bonds, what you think of as Wall Street investments, you do not actually own directly the investment itself. You think you do, but you don't own it. They changed it so that one singular institution called DTC, the Depository Trust Company, is the single owner of virtually all securities investments in the United States today. More than $80 trillion worth of investments held by one institution, which they then put in the Federal Reserve. And then they built all these laws on top of it so that if they really need to use it, they could bail out big institutions potentially using your investments. They have the ability to do this with just some minor changes to the law. They could easily do this so that the too big to fail institutions survive and you may be crushed in the process. But, oh well, that needs to happen in order to stave off what one of the experts involved in all of this said, an Armageddon-like scenario.
This is so shocking how... I mean, I really believe our biggest problems come from the greed of Wall Street and banking. I mean, the banks are so unbelievably self-centered and egotistical. Well, we make the world possible. Well, yeah, except all the workers that are working for the money that is depositing in your bank, they kind of make you possible. But, it's amazing how they just cut government, big corporations. This is fascism, by the way. Government, big corporations, and banking all colluding together where you really get the shaft every time. Hopefully we don't have to ever see any of this happen. And hopefully you just bringing attention to it might really help to make sure it doesn't happen again, or it doesn't happen a first time in this particular case. Who was it that put all this together? How did this happen?
Okay, so this is an incredible story, and it took me 3 years to put all of the pieces together. But a lot of this is fact. Some of it, there's theory. I'll explain when it's theory and when I think it's a fact. Okay, so what we know is this. The initial person who was put in charge of this project by all these powerful interests on Wall Street and banks was a guy named William Denser. William Denser has passed away. He's no longer with us. But William Denser was the guy who was put in charge of DTC when it first launched, and he ran it for 2 decades.
Okay, stop. So what made them want to do this? Because yesterday you said it was getting bogged down because you can't print the stock certificates fast enough because there was just too much trading going on, et cetera, et cetera. And that makes sense that they would do that. Was that the only reason they stated that people started thinking about how do we fix that, or were there other motivations?
Yes, there were other motivations in addition to solving what they were calling the paperwork crisis that was happening on Wall Street. The other big motivations were by centralizing ownership of all the securities, they essentially control those securities in the event of a catastrophic situation. They're the direct owners of it, so they can tap into that wealth if they need to. But on a day-to-day basis, these institutions are getting filthy rich off of this model, because now when you buy an investment, you're not really buying the investment, so they get to use the investments to do derivatives trading, to do stock lending, to do options and futures and all these other things. And they're making a fortune off of it.
Now, let me explain this and correct me if I'm wrong. So what that means is if I have the Bank of Glenn and I convince you to put all of your stocks and bonds and everything into my bank and I'm holding them, and then I change the law so you don't actually own them, but for your own good, I own them. You can have access to them at any time that you want and you think everything is fine. But what you don't know is I'm sitting on $70 trillion. And so I can take that to other banks, other institutions and say, I've got this big asset here of $70 trillion. I need this loan so I can go buy these other assets and make trillions of dollars on that. Without using my own money, I'm using your assets to borrow against. And then I can also... Right? Is that right?
So
or wrong?
They can do that if they were to change some of the rules and laws. They're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to do that. They have been caught doing it in certain situations, like in 2008, there were institutions doing this, where the laws that I'm talking about here were triggered. So this exact thing that I'm warning everybody about, that happened with Lehman Brothers in 2008, JP Morgan Chase Bank and Lehman Brothers, and the exact thing that I'm warning everybody about in this book, The Next Big Crash, happened in 2008, and it happened again in 2011 with another firm, and it's happened in other periods of time too, in limited cases. So this isn't just theoretical. There are examples. It's in the book. You can look it up. What I'm referring to when I'm talking about being able to pull from people's assets is if all of the securities are owned by one institution and you get somebody who is on Wall Street and they're trading on margin, meaning, and they're borrowing stocks so that they're basically gambling on Wall Street. Think of it as gambling on Wall Street. You're making risky investments to maximize your gains. They don't need to go to anybody to ask permission, basically, because all of the stock in the whole world, essentially in America, is all owned by one institution. So all the institutions on Wall Street are part owners of this DTC institution. It's a corporation.
But we're not.
But the public can't. The only people who can own it, but really, DTC is a subsidiary of another company called DTCC. DTCC is a corporation owned by Wall Street firms and banks who use it. You have to use the institution to be a part owner in it. Regular people can't buy it. So they're all benefiting from the fact that this property is being held in this one institution, and they can all basically pull from it in order to do all kinds of crazy things on Wall Street. The entire derivatives market, and in the book, I've got example after example of people admitting this. The entire derivatives market, stock lending, options, futures, all of that stuff would not be possible.
Explain what derivatives are.
A derivative is an investment that's derived from an underlying investment. It's not the actual investment itself. So this is why when I say it's like gambling, it's kind of like gambling. Like if you imagine a football game and you've got two teams playing each other, you have the game. But then you have all of these other people who might be betting on the outcome of the game, but it's not the game itself. It's the betting of what's going to happen. So then you have other people betting on the bettors. This is how this works. And there's layer upon layer upon layer of basically betting on what's going to happen in the future. And there are...
So in other words, let's say I have a pile of AAA rated loans for houses. AAA, they're never supposed to go under because they're all AAA. They're all the best. They're all the best people, as Trump would say. All the best people. They haven't seen anything like this before. Those people can come in and bet that, yeah, those are not going to go down. And some others can bet, no, we're going to have problems and you're going to see AAA loans go down. And so they're actually gambling on what's going to happen to that series of loans. And that's all one way or another, all connected. So when it starts to fall, everything falls apart.
Yeah, this is
correct.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this was related to what happened in 2008. And there are legitimate reasons and good things that you can do with derivatives. You can hedge, and there are good reasons to have it as well. But whenever you hear people talk about credit default swaps or other kinds of swaps, or futures trading, or shorting, like people hear about the short, and you have the movie, The Big Short, that was all about the 2008 crash. All of this is derivatives trading. all of that would not be possible, or a lot of his derivatives. A lot of that would not be possible at scale without this model, because they would have to go out and ask permission to use other people's property when they've got securities sitting in their own personal vault at home. You couldn't use that. So by centralizing it, you get to access all of that wealth and move it around. But I think there's also a lot more nefarious stuff going on, even more nefarious than that.
Okay. Tell me what's worse, more nefarious than what we were just talking about.
Okay, so I think fundamentally, and some of this is fact, some of this is theory, and I'll explain that more, but I think fundamentally, this is about the most powerful people in America at that time, and even to this day, wanting control over the system and wanting to make sure that you, as the individual, don't have the ability to control your own property, so that if there was a crisis, they would be prepared. In the meantime, they keep getting richer and richer off of the system. Now, the reason this is, I think, one of the most incredible conspiracies of all time, Creature of Jekyll Island type stuff, I think even crazier than that, is because of this man named William Denser. William Denser is the guy who they put in charge of controlling this institution, DTC, that owns all of the securities investments. When I first learned about William Denser, I realized there had to be something wrong here, because when they put him in charge, he was completely and utterly unqualified to run this Wall Street institution. He made no sense prior to...
What'd you find out about him?
So
because I believe it made sense in the end.
So prior to running this institution, he was the chief bank regulator in New York. Okay, so he had no Wall Street experience, no experience doing stocks, had no experience working for a clearinghouse. He was the chief bank regulator, which maybe you could say, well, that's kind of the same thing, except being the chief bank regulator of New York was also a position that he was completely unqualified for, because he had no experience in banking, no experience working in economics, no experience in domestic policy, basically, before getting that position. And he only had it for a couple of years. So you go back one more layer. Well, what was he doing before that? Before that, he was he was part of this New York Economic Commission, which, again, he was completely and totally unqualified for. Made no sense. No domestic policy experience. How did he get that job? All of this is happening within just a few years. He's jumping to all these jobs. Suddenly he's in charge of the most powerful institution in the world. So you go all the way back to William Denser's early days as a college student. This is where the story gets just crazy. He's a college student. He becomes the head of this national student organization called the National Student Association, the NSA. Not the NSA like the intelligence agency, right. The NSA, National Student Association, the largest one in the whole country. At the time, nobody knew this. But at the time, William Denser created, possibly it was him that initiated it, but he was definitely doing this, had a relationship with the CIA, where the CIA was funding this National Student Association illegally to run propaganda operations in the United States. So for several years, nobody knew about this. They found out about it later, like 15 years after he left. He's running the student organization getting funded by the CIA. So then he leaves the Students Association after he's done with college. He ends up getting drafted into the military in the mid-1950s. And the CIA comes and says, actually, you're not going to be in the military. You're coming to the CIA. So he goes and he works for the CIA. So now he's in the CIA. And what he's doing in the CIA, I'm not entirely sure, except there are some insane stories that I found in the book. One of them, for example, is one of his buddies who was also in the intelligence community, working and previously was in the National Student Association. He winds up dead at a hotel in the late 1950s in New York City. They find him, the maid finds him naked on the floor with a belt around his neck. They rule it a suicide. Okay? The family says, no way it's a suicide. No chance whatsoever. So they go to the media at some point later on and they tell this story to the Los Angeles Times. And they say, at the funeral, this crazy thing happened. This guy came up to us at the funeral, swore us to secrecy, the father and the uncle, and said, your son was a hero. Maybe the Soviets assassinated him. If they did assassinate him, it wouldn't surprise me. And who is this guy? It's William Denser. So then the family thought, well, actually, maybe the CIA killed him. I don't know. And the story only gets weirder and weirder from here.
Okay. Justin wrote the book, The Next Big Crash, which is out on Amazon, wherever you get your books, but the audiobook and the book at Amazon.com. And we were talking about this thing that he released yesterday. He told us about yesterday, about this organization held by all the big Wall Street bankers and now the Federal Reserve that actually controls what you think you own. You don't have a stock certificate. You have a receipt from Charles Schwab or something that says, yeah, we have these in your name, but you're not holding them. They're not in your name. They might be at Charles Schwab, but they're not where they're actually being held. They're owned by one institution that's part of the Federal Reserve, and it was built this way in case of catastrophic events, an Armageddon, if you will. They can use that to keep all the banks propped up. You lose, but they'll be fine. Any of this sound familiar? So we were talking about how weird it's getting because the guy who was put in charge of this did not have the resume to be in charge of this. What did you say holds $80 trillion now?
That's right. Yep. Over 1 million securities, $80 trillion worth of securities. Yeah.
Yeah. He did not have he didn't have the resume for it. And then the job he had before that didn't have the resume. We find out that he was in the CIA. And you were just telling a story about somebody who dies in New York and a family is alerted by this same guy. Hey, he was a hero. You know, maybe the Russians killed him. And then you said it got weirder from there. How does it get weirder from there?
Well, so while he's in the CIA, it seems, and he's doing things like that story, he's also still involved with the National Student Association doing what I think is illegal propaganda.
Of course it is.
Yeah, with the CIA.
Yes, the CIA is not supposed to operate in the United States of America.
That's
They're
right.
in the territory
and
of the
they were
United States.
using students who had no money as a way to accomplish this mission. So I think that was one of his main responsibilities while he's in the CIA. Then he leaves the CIA when Kennedy becomes president to be in charge of helping to start this little program that you've probably heard of. It's called USAID. So this guy...
Oh, my gosh.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
my gosh.
Yep.
You got to be kidding me.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
So he was one of the main people who helped create USAID. He wasn't the top person, but he was in charge of hiring the top 20 people for USAID. And that really doesn't make any sense either, unless you understand that USAID was basically a quasi-intelligence operation. So it makes sense that you would want someone from the CIA with a CIA background helping to do that.
The reason, again, you know, it is so evil of these people. The Federal Reserve is named the Federal Reserve Bank because they wanted everybody to believe that that is a federal institution. It's not. It's a private organization, okay? Same thing with USAID. The reason why they call it that is because people for a long time called it USAID. It's not aid. It is a way for the CIA. Kennedy didn't mean it for this. You know, he was taking apart a CIA, operation and said that's got to stop. He created this one, but this one immediately became, again, a way to funnel money through the CIA to get all of their black ops done. And nobody still won't admit that.
Yep.
So this guy leaves this to go right directly to start this other with the Federal Reserve or what?
So throughout the 1960s, before he gets to DTC, he's in the State Department doing different things. He's working for USAID. Then he's working for this thing called Alliance for Progress, which was another effort to basically have the CIA and the U.S. government manipulate things happening in South and Central America. That was one of the main goals of all of this. He was in South America working on top secret things. I have some of the top secret documents with memos and things that involve him where he's talking about how they were using the U.S. government was propping up regimes and trying to stop other candidates from winning in various places in South America using USAID and other institutions and propaganda efforts. They say propaganda in these memos. It's unbelievable. So he's involved in all of this. His last job in the State Department, this is where it's so important for people to understand. His last job in the State Department is he's in Peru. He's the USAID director in Peru. Now, at the time, there was a friendly sort of leader. The president of Peru at the time was friendly to U.S. interests. U.S. cared about Peru a lot at the time because they had a very important company that had access to the oil fields in Peru. And this was a super hot button issue in Peru. The Peruvian people were very unhappy with this because they felt like they were getting screwed with this deal with this U.S. company that had this. The company was called IPC. This is the International Petroleum Company. Okay. So one of the main jobs for William Dentzer was making sure that people in Peru didn't go crazy and get rid of this president who was helping the United States and have this sweet oil arrangement that's going on there. The year that William Dentzer leaves, and I don't know exactly when he left, but I know it was the same year. The year he left, there is a coup in Peru. The military overthrows the existing government, the pro-American government. William Dentzer leaves sometime around this same exact period. And the big reason why was a controversy over this oil company. Now, the International Petroleum Company was a subsidiary of another oil company called Standard Oil. Standard Oil were the Rockefellers. Okay, so he leaves this, and very shortly after he leaves the State Department, all he's ever known is CIA operations, student activism, State Department, all that kind of stuff. He leaves and he ends up in New York, and suddenly he's doing all of these things in finance that he had no experience doing and no qualifications for. Well, remember, Rockefeller Oil Company in Peru. Who is the person that brought him into New York? It was the governor of New York, Nelson Rockefeller. So Nelson Rockefeller brings him into New York, and now he's in New York on all these economic commissions. He's appointed by the governor to be the chief bank regulator. All of that is happening by the Rockefellers in New York
And if
City.
I'm not mistaken, wasn't the Rockefellers, they were big pushers of ending the gold standard as well.
That's right.
What was their involvement, if any, with this, this group that you found that's now inside of the Federal Reserve?
So
were they involved with that?
Everything, all of these people are the same people. It's all happening at the same time. The Rockefeller family, Nelson Rockefeller was really big into Republican politics. The whole Rockefeller Republican thing is named after Nelson Rockefeller. Nelson Rockefeller becomes vice president. Nixon is president at the time that we end the gold standard. And the Rockefellers, who are heavy into banking and finance and all of that. David Rockefeller, Nelson's brother, was the head of one of the big New York banks, Chase Manhattan. And so all of this is going on. They're all pushing for Nixon to end the gold standard. That's what they want. So they're doing that at the exact same time that they're centralizing ownership of all of these securities investments, and people don't even realize that it's happening. It's all occurring within just a couple of years. So this was a total transformation of the financial system, of who controls wealth. A lot of the money printing that happened after this is a result of the decoupling of the gold standard from the dollar. All of this is being driven by the Rockefellers and their allies. And the Rockefellers had high-level people who worked with them in banking and other things who were running big parts of the State Department at the time. David Rockefeller himself had been offered to be the Treasury Secretary numerous times, and he turned it down because he could actually be more influential running banks than he could be as Treasury Secretary. So all of this is going on at the same time, and the world had just no idea that these things were happening behind the scenes. So you got to ask yourself, why would they put the CIA guy from the State Department in charge of this project when he had there was no qualifications. He had no reason to be in charge of it. Well, I think it's obvious. He was connected to the Rockefellers. He was an intelligence guy. He was a State Department guy. And that's who they wanted running an op like this.
Let me tie something else together. I'm sure you tie it together in the book. But here's the real reason you have that. This Rockefellers, part of the banking system, who's making all of the money from these derivatives and everything else you can do if they can put together the DCC, right?
Yeah. DTC.
Who makes the money? The banks make all of the money. Okay. I had a banker who just left the banking world tell me, very, very high up, New York banking. And he said, Glenn, you can't go back to the gold standard. there's not enough money to finance everything that the world wants and needs if we were on the gold standard. And he said, that's why we got off of it. Well, there's another reason to get off the gold standard. If you're a banker, you want to write those loans because you make more money. You want to be able to have all of this money in one giant pile, $80 trillion, that you can manipulate to make yourself and your buddies rich. I mean, that's why that guy was in charge of it. I mean, that's clear. He's doing the work of the, I wonder, Justin, I wonder how much money, actual money that of ours, that somebody's getting rich off of us, and how much are just our taxpayers, plus now this that you just exposed, how much of it is actually going to fund color revolutions now here in the United States? How much money has gone into black ops from this organization? I bet astounding amounts of cash.
And that's the thing. All of this is shrouded in secrecy, and we don't have access to any of this stuff because it's not government.
All right. Justin, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Justin Haskins, Heartland Institute Vice President, our Republic Senior Fellow. And the name of this book, you've got to read it, is called The Next Big Crash. The Next Big Crash. It's available at Amazon or wherever you get your books. Get it now. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thanks, Glenn.
Appreciate it.